I walked into my childhood bedroom to find my sister trying on my wedding dress. Her reflection beamed in the mirror as my mother stood behind her saying, "She's the prettier bride anyway." My handwritten vows still tucked in the garment bag where I had stored them just yesterday. For a moment, time freezes. My sister Melissa doesn't notice me at first, too busy admiring her reflection, spinning slowly to see how the delicate lace train follows her movement. My mother stands behind her, pins in hand, marking adjustments. "The bodice needs to be taken in here," my mother says, pinching the fabric at Melissa's waist. "But otherwise it's like it was made for you." It was made for me. Custom designed. Paid for in full with money I earned from the job I've had since college, unlike my sister who still gets her credit card bills paid by our mother. The same mother who is now helping Melissa try on my wedding dress. My wedding dress for my wedding. In 6 weeks. "What are you doing?" My voice comes out calmer than I feel, a skill I've perfected over years of being Natalie Green, the sensible daughter, the responsible one, the one who never causes a scene. They both startle, turning toward the doorway where I stand. Melissa has the grace to look momentarily guilty, but it's fleeting. My mother simply straightens as if I've interrupted a perfectly normal fitting session. "Natalie," she says, her voice switching to the placating tone she uses when she's about to justify something unjustifiable. "You're early. We weren't expecting you until dinner." Clearly. I step into the room, my childhood sanctuary now feeling like hostile territory. "Why is Melissa wearing my wedding dress?" My mother sighs as if I'm being difficult. "Sweetheart, we were going to tell you. It just makes sense. Melissa's wedding is in 2 months, right after yours. The dress is already paid for, and let's be honest, Natalie." She pauses, meeting my eyes with that unflinching certainty that has always made me doubt myself. "Melissa is the prettier bride. This dress deserves to be seen at its best." The words hit like physical blows. Not because they're surprising, but because they're familiar. Melissa is the prettier one. Melissa is the special one. Melissa deserves the best. The soundtrack of my childhood, played on repeat. Melissa at least has the decency to look uncomfortable. It's just that my dress fell through. The designer went bankrupt and they couldn't fulfill the order. Mom thought she could just give away my wedding dress without asking me. I finish for her. I look at the garment bag draped over my childhood bed, the one that should be containing my dress. "Where are my vows?" My mother waves dismissively. "In the drawer." "Natalie, don't make this a bigger deal than it is. You can find another dress. Something more." She eyes me up and down, "Suitable for your figure. This was always too delicate for you." I walk to the drawer and retrieve my vows, carefully written on the stationery Ethan and I had chosen together. As I tuck them into my purse, I notice Melissa and my mother exchanging glances, the silent communication of conspirators. "Take off the dress, Melissa." My voice is steady, betraying none of the rage and hurt churning beneath the surface. "Natalie," my mother starts, but I cut her off. "Now." Melissa hesitates, then nods. "Fine, but you don't have to be dramatic about it." I wait in silence as Melissa disappears into the adjoining bathroom. My mother stands with arms crossed, her expression a mixture of annoyance and something else, anxiety. She knows she's crossed a line, even by her standards. "Your sister's venue fell through too," she says finally. "I put the deposit for the new one on your card. I'll pay you back, of course, but it was last minute and my credit limit wasn't high enough." Another boundary crossed. Another decision made without my consent. But I don't explode. I don't scream. I simply nod, filing the information away for later. Melissa returns, the dress carefully draped over her arm. She holds it out to me with a tight smile. "No hard feelings, right? You know how crazy wedding planning gets." I take the dress, inspecting it carefully for damage, for alterations already begun. It looks untouched, but the violation remains. This was mine. Something sacred. Something that represented my future with Ethan. And they took it without a second thought. "I need to go," I say, gathering the dress and its garment bag. "Don't be like this, Natalie," my mother says, following me toward the door. "We're family. We share things." I turn to face her, this woman who has consistently put my sister's wants above my needs, who is now trying to take the symbol of my new beginning and turn it into just another thing Melissa gets first. "Not anymore," I say quietly and walk out the door. As I drive away, the dress carefully laid out in my back seat, my phone begins to buzz with texts from my mother. "You're overreacting. Melissa is devastated. It's just a dress, Natalie. Don't be selfish." I don't respond. For the first time in my life, I don't feel the need to explain myself, to apologize, to smooth things over. Instead, I drive straight to Ethan's apartment, the one place where I've always felt valued for exactly who I am, the one place where I'm never second best. I don't cry until I'm safely inside Ethan's apartment, the dress hanging in his closet where my mother can't reach it. Only then do I allow the tears to come, hot and fast, my body shaking with the force of them. Ethan holds me without questions, his steadiness a counterpoint to my storm. When the tears finally subside, I tell him everything. The dress, the credit card, the casual cruelty of my mother's words. "She's the prettier bride." I repeat the words flatly, as if that's all that matters, as if that's all I am. Ethan's face darkens with anger. "That's insane, Natalie. Your mother had no right." "It's not just about rights," I interrupt. "It's about the pattern. It's always been this way. Melissa first. Melissa prettiest. Melissa deserving the best." I wipe my eyes, suddenly exhausted. And me paying for it all. Because that's the part my mother conveniently omits from her narrative of the golden daughter and the plain one. The fact that I'm the one funding their lives. The down payment on my mother's condo after the divorce. The loans to Melissa that somehow never get repaid. The credit card my mother uses for emergencies that mysteriously includes spa days and designer purchases. "What do you want to do?" Ethan asks, his hands steady on mine. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." What do I want to do? In the past, the answer would be automatic: smooth things over. Keep the peace. Be the responsible one who never rocks the boat. But something has shifted inside me. A lifetime of overlooked birthdays, of hand-me-downs while Melissa got new, of working extra shifts to help with family expenses while Melissa pursued her passions. All leading to this moment where even my wedding dress wasn't sacred. "I need some time," I say finally. "Just to think." Ethan nods, understanding without my having to explain. It's one of the countless reasons I'm marrying him. He sees me. Really sees me, in a way my family never has. My phone buzzes again. More texts from my mother, and now Melissa, their tone shifting from defensive to conciliatory. "Mom, let's talk about this like adults. Come to dinner tomorrow." "Melissa, I'm sorry if I upset you. I should have asked first. The dress is yours." I set the phone aside without responding. Their apologies always come like this, when they realize they've pushed too far, when they fear their safety net might finally break. Never from genuine remorse. That night, I can't sleep. I lie awake beside Ethan, mentally cataloging every instance of favoritism, every financial burden I've quietly shouldered while my mother praised Melissa's independence. The dress was just the latest, most visible example of a pattern that has defined my entire life. By morning, I've made 2 decisions. First, I'm not responding to any messages from my family until I'm ready. Second, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with financially. The first person to notice my silence is my cousin Kate, who texts me midday. "Aunt Helen is freaking out. Says you stormed off with the dress and won't answer her calls." What happened? I hesitate, then type back. "She gave my wedding dress to Melissa without asking me. Said Melissa was the prettier bride." Kate's response is immediate and vehement. "What? That's beyond messed up. Are you okay?" For the first time since yesterday, I smile slightly. I spend the day working, my focus laser sharp despite the emotional turmoil. My colleagues notice nothing amiss. I've perfected the art of compartmentalization, of functioning at peak performance even when my personal life is in shambles. Another skill developed from years of being the dependable daughter. By evening, my mother has escalated to voicemails, each more manipulative than the last. Natalie, this silent treatment is childish. We're trying to apologize. Your sister is in tears. Is that what you wanted? Your Aunt Diane called asking about the rehearsal dinner arrangements. What am I supposed to tell her? That you're not speaking to us over a dress? I canceled my hair appointment to deal with this crisis you've created. I hope you're happy. Each message confirms what I already know. In their world, I am the problem. My feelings are inconvenient. My boundaries are selfish. At home, Ethan and I eat takeout while I work up the courage to do what I should have done years ago. I pull up my online banking app and begin a systematic review of exactly how much financial support I've provided to my family. The numbers are staggering when compiled. The down payment on my mother's condo, the loan for Melissa's car, the credit card my mother uses that I pay off each month, the family vacations I've funded because we deserve time together. Years of financial drainage, hidden in plain sight because I never allowed myself to see the full picture. Because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging how thoroughly I've been used. Ethan, I say quietly, showing him the spreadsheet I've created. This is what they've taken from me. He studies it, his expression shifting from surprise to anger. Natalie, this is financial abuse. The word lands like a revelation. Abuse. Not generosity. Not family support. Abuse. What do I do? I ask, not really expecting an answer, but Ethan, practical as always, has one. You talk to a financial advisor. And maybe a therapist. And definitely a lawyer. I nod slowly. For once, I'm not going to smooth things over. I'm not going to accept a half-hearted apology and go back to the status quo. This time, I'm going to value myself the way my family never has. By morning, the messages have grown desperate. Both my mother and Melissa clearly realizing that this silence is different from my usual quick forgiveness. Mom, Natalie, please. Your sister's wedding is falling apart. We need to talk about the venue payment. Melissa, Mom told me about the credit card thing. I didn't know. Please call me. I don't. Instead, I make an appointment with a financial advisor for that afternoon, and for the first time in my life, I put my own needs first. The financial advisor's office is sleek and modern, all glass and chrome. Patricia Winters greets me with a firm handshake and direct eye contact. She doesn't waste time on small talk, something I immediately appreciate. So, Natalie, she says, settling behind her desk. You mentioned on the phone that you needed to disentangle your finances from family members. Let's start with the basics. I place my folder on her desk. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, all meticulously organized. Another skill born from being the responsible one. My mother and sister have been financially dependent on me for years. I need to understand my options for setting boundaries. Patricia begins reviewing the documents, her expression growing increasingly concerned. You've been carrying quite a burden, she says finally. This down payment on your mother's condo, $50,000. Was this documented as a loan or a gift? A loan. I have the paperwork here. I pull out the agreement, signed by both my mother and me. She's made 3 payments in 4 years. And this credit card, it's in my name. I added my mother as an authorized user after my father left. It was supposed to be temporary for emergencies. Patricia checks the statements. These don't look like emergencies, Natalie. High-end restaurants, boutique shopping, spa treatments. And most recently, a deposit for my sister's wedding venue. I pull out the transaction details, without my knowledge or consent. Patricia removes her glasses, fixing me with a direct gaze. That's fraud, Natalie. The word hangs between us. Fraud. Not generosity. Not a misunderstanding. Fraud. What are my options? I ask, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You have several. Patricia begins outlining them methodically. First, you can cancel the credit card immediately. Any charges your mother made without your consent, especially this venue deposit, can be disputed with the credit card company. She flips to the loan agreement for the condo. Second, this document gives you the right to demand repayment in full if your mother defaults on the payment schedule, which she clearly has. I don't want to make my mother homeless, I say quickly. Patricia nods. That's not the goal. But this agreement gives you leverage. You can renegotiate terms, establish clear boundaries, or even convert your investment into partial ownership of the property. For the next hour, we go through every financial entanglement, identifying my legal position and potential actions. The picture that emerges is surprisingly empowering. I'm not a victim, I'm a creditor. I hold the leverage. There's one more thing, I say as our meeting wraps up. My wedding is in 6 weeks. My sister's is 2 weeks after that. I need to make sure any financial changes don't impact my own plans. Patricia pulls up my credit report. Your credit score is excellent. Your personal finances, separate from these family entanglements, are in good shape. You should have no trouble covering your wedding expenses independently. I feel a weight lifting. For years, I've operated under the assumption that I needed to maintain these financial relationships, that cutting ties would hurt me as much as them. Now I understand that's not true. What would you recommend as my first step? I ask. Cancel that credit card immediately, Patricia says without hesitation. Then contact a family law attorney. I can recommend someone who specializes in financial boundaries. I nod, a plan already forming in my mind. And the venue deposit for my sister's wedding? Dispute it with the credit card company as an unauthorized charge. But, she adds with a knowing look, be prepared for familial fallout. As I drive away from Patricia's office, my phone buzzes with yet another call from my mother. This time, I answer. Natalie, finally. This silent treatment is beyond childish. I'm not being silent, Mom. I'm being strategic. A pause, then. What is that supposed to mean? It means I've been reviewing our financial arrangements with my advisor. The condo loan, the credit card, Melissa's borrowed funds that never get repaid. Another pause, longer this time. When my mother speaks again, her voice has lost its edge of irritation, replaced by something I rarely hear from her, uncertainty. Natalie, those are family matters. There's no need to involve outsiders. Actually, there is. You used my credit card without permission to pay for Melissa's wedding venue. That's fraud, Mom. Fraud? Don't be ridiculous. I always pay that card. Well, you pay it, but I've always meant to contribute. I've canceled the card, I interrupt. And I'm disputing the venue charge. Her sharp intake of breath is audible. You can't do that. Melissa will lose her venue. Her whole wedding is at stake. Like you cared about my wedding when you gave away my dress? The words come out calmer than I feel. Actions have consequences, Mom. This is the consequence of using me financially while treating me as second best. That's not fair. We're family. Yes, we are. And from now on, we're going to be family with boundaries. I take a deep breath. I'll be sending you formal documentation regarding the condo loan. You have 2 options. Start making the agreed-upon payments, or we can discuss converting my investment into partial ownership. Ownership? Of my home. Her voice rises in panic. Natalie, you wouldn't. I don't want to, but I will if necessary. I pause, letting the message sink in. And Mom? Don't ever touch my wedding dress again. I end the call before she can respond. Seconds later, a text from Melissa appears. What did you say to Mom? She's hysterical about the venue. I don't respond immediately. Instead, I drive to Ethan's apartment, where my dress hangs safely in his closet. I run my fingers over the delicate lace, the pearl beading I chose myself, the subtle design elements that represent not Melissa's tastes, but mine. Then I text my sister back. I canceled the credit card Mom used for your venue deposit. Unauthorized use. You should call them directly about payment options. Her response is immediate and predictable. Are you serious? You know I can't afford that. You're ruining my wedding because of a stupid dress. I type my final message of the day. No, Melissa. I'm establishing boundaries because of a lifetime of being taken for granted. The dress was just the last straw. I set my phone to do not disturb and join Ethan on the couch. He pulls me close, kissing the top of my head. How did it go with the financial advisor? I lean into his embrace, feeling truly secure for the first time in days. It went well. I know where I stand now. And more importantly, so do they. My journey is just beginning. There will be confrontations to face, boundaries to defend, a wedding to reclaim as my own. But as I sit there in Ethan's arms, I realize something fundamental has shifted. I am no longer the overlooked daughter, quietly funding everyone else's dreams. I am Natalie Green, bride-to-be, woman of worth, and it's about time everyone, including me, recognized that. The law office of Caroline Bennett feels like a sanctuary. Clean lines, soft lighting, and an atmosphere of quiet confidence. The woman across the desk from me has kind eyes, but a reputation for ruthless efficiency in family financial matters. So, Caroline says, reviewing the documents I've provided. Your mother has been in default on a significant loan for years, fraudulently used your credit card, and there's a pattern of financial exploitation. And now they've escalated to taking your wedding dress. I nod, still uncomfortable with framing it so bluntly. The dress was just the breaking point. Caroline sets down her pen. Often in these cases, there's a catalyst. A moment when all the small violations suddenly come into focus. She taps the folder containing my financial records. These aren't small violations, Natalie. For the next hour, we review every document, every transaction, every financial commitment. Caroline takes meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Unlike Patricia, the financial advisor, who focused on the numbers, Caroline is mapping out a legal strategy. Your position is stronger than you might think, she says finally. The condo loan alone gives you significant leverage. As for the fraudulent credit card charges, you've already taken appropriate steps by canceling the card and disputing the venue payment. I don't want to destroy my family, I say quietly. I just want the dynamic to change. Caroline nods. That's precisely why we're establishing a legal framework for that change. Without clear boundaries, they'll continue the pattern. She slides a document across the desk. This is a formal demand for loan repayment with reasonable terms. You'll give your mother options, begin making regular payments, refinance, or discuss partial property ownership. The letter is firm but not cruel. Professional, not emotional. It transforms me from a daughter being taken advantage of into a creditor enforcing a legitimate agreement. Send this certified mail, Caroline advises. Documentation is crucial moving forward. As I leave Caroline's office, I feel oddly light. For years, I've carried the weight of being the family supporter while receiving the least support in return. Now, that weight is shifting. Back home, Ethan has prepared dinner. Over pasta and wine, I share the details of my meeting. Caroline thinks we should document everything from this point forward. Any communication, any financial requests, any manipulation attempts. Ethan nods thoughtfully. Your mom called while you were out. Said something about family obligations and how you need to think about Melissa's special day. I take a sip of wine, no longer feeling the immediate anxiety such messages once triggered. Did she mention anything about my special day? About the dress she gave away? Not a word. Of course not. My wedding has always been secondary to Melissa's in my mother's mind, despite mine being first on the calendar. The irony doesn't escape me. I've funded family events for years, yet my own celebration is treated as an afterthought. I think we need to reevaluate our wedding plans, I say suddenly. Not cancel anything, but reconsider what this day means for us. What we actually want, not what my family expects. Ethan reaches for my hand. I'm all for that. What are you thinking? Something more us. More intimate, maybe. Less about meeting my mother's social expectations and more about celebrating our relationship. As we discuss possibilities, I feel a growing sense of liberation. My wedding doesn't need to be a performance for my family's approval. It can be a genuine reflection of Ethan and me. The next morning brings predictable fallout. Multiple missed calls from my mother, increasingly desperate texts from Melissa. Mom, the venue is demanding immediate payment. You need to unfreeze the card right now. Melissa, my entire wedding is falling apart because of you. Is this really how you want things to be between us? I don't respond immediately. Instead, I call my Aunt Linda, my father's sister who is always seen through my mother's favoritism. Natalie, she answers warmly. I was hoping you'd call. There's quite the uproar happening. I imagine so, I reply. Has Mom called you? Oh, yes. According to Helen, you've lost your mind, canceled her credit card, and are threatening to take her home away. Aunt Linda's tone makes it clear she doesn't believe this version of events. Want to tell me what's really happening? I give her the unvarnished truth, the dress, the venue charge, the years of financial drainage. With each detail, her sighs deepen. Oh, Natalie. I've watched this happen for years, but never realized how extensive it was. Your mother has always, well, Melissa has always been her mirror image. But this crosses lines. I'm not trying to punish them, I explain. I just can't keep enabling this behavior. Of course not. And your wedding dress. I can't believe Helen would do that. She pauses. Have you spoken with your father about this? My father. The man who left when I was 16, who sends birthday cards with modest checks that arrive 3 weeks late. Who has largely been absent from the financial struggles his departure created. Not yet. You should. He still feels guilty about leaving, you know. He might be more supportive than you expect. After our call, I start compiling a communication record. Every text, every call, every manipulative attempt documented with timestamps and content. The record quickly reveals a pattern: initial anger, then guilt tactics, then promises to change, then threats of family disruption if I don't relent. BY evening. I receive the most telling message yet. Mom, Natalie, we need to talk about the loan letter. You can't be serious about this. After everything I've done for me? The audacity almost makes me laugh. But I don't respond with anger. Instead, I forward the message to Caroline, adding it to our growing documentation. Then I sit down with Ethan and begin reimagining our wedding day, not as the event my mother has been micromanaging, but as the celebration we truly want. By the time we finish, the vision is clearer than it's ever been: a wedding that's authentically ours. A marriage that won't be undermined by unhealthy family dynamics. A future built on mutual respect, not obligation. The plan is taking shape, and for the first time, I'm not just the executor of someone else's vision. I'm the architect of my own life. The certified letter arrives at my mother's condo on a Tuesday. I know this because she calls me 17 times within the hour, her voicemails escalating from disbelief to outrage to tearful pleading. A formal loan demand? What is wrong with you? We're family. I can't believe you're doing this right before both your weddings. Do you want to ruin everything? Natalie, please. You know I can't make these payments. What am I supposed to do? I listen to each message once, adding them to my documentation file, but I don't call back. Not yet. Caroline advised giving my mother time to absorb the reality of the situation before engaging further. Meanwhile, I focus on implementing the next phase of my plan. I contact our wedding venue, the florist, the caterer, and the photographer to confirm that all contracts are in my name only and password protect the accounts. The last thing I need is my mother trying to make changes out of spite. Ethan and I have also revised our guest list, a task I'd been dreading, but that proves surprisingly liberating. We removed distant relatives my mother insisted on including for appearance's sake. We add friends who truly matter to us. The resulting list is smaller, but infinitely more meaningful. BY Thursday, my mother has shifted tactics. She appears at my office during lunch, mascara carefully smudged to suggest she's been crying, carrying a small photo album. "Natalie," she says, her voice wobbling as my colleagues glance our way. "We need to talk, sweetheart." I guide her outside to a nearby bench, maintaining a calm exterior despite my racing heart. This is the first time we've been face to face since the dress incident. "The loan letter," she begins, clutching the photo album. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious, Mom." She opens the album, showing pictures of me as a child. School plays, birthday parties, holidays. "After everything I've sacrificed for you. I gave you everything." I look at the carefully curated images, noticing what's missing. The moments after these photos when Melissa inevitably became the center of attention. When my achievements were acknowledged but never celebrated. When everything meant basic parental duties, nothing more. This isn't about the past, Mom. It's about the present and the future. I've supported you and Melissa financially for years while being treated as an afterthought. That stops now. By threatening to take my home. Her voice rises. By enforcing an agreement you signed. I keep my tone measured. You have options. You can make the agreed upon payments, you can refinance the loan, or we can discuss partial ownership. I don't have that kind of money. And now Melissa's venue is demanding full payment in 3 days, or they'll cancel her reservation. You've ruined everything. I meet her gaze steadily. No, Mom. You ruined things when you gave away my wedding dress. When you charged Melissa's venue to my card without permission. When you taught her that taking from me was acceptable. She snaps the photo album shut. So this is punishment. This is a boundary. There's a difference. My mother's expression shifts from hurt to calculation. Fine, if that's how you want it. But don't expect to be welcome at Melissa's wedding. And maybe you should reconsider if we're welcome at yours. The threat hangs in the air, the ultimate leverage she thinks she holds. Withholding family presence at my wedding. Once, this would have devastated me. Now, I find it clarifies things further. That's your choice, I say simply. But it doesn't change the loan terms. She leaves in a flutter of indignation, already on her phone, undoubtedly calling relatives to share her version of events. I return to my office and document the encounter immediately while the details are fresh. That evening, Melissa calls. Her voice lacks our mother's theatrical quaver. Instead, she sounds genuinely panicked. "The venue is going to cancel, Natalie." I don't know what to do. For the first time, I hear no entitlement in my sister's tone. Just fear. "Have you looked into other payment options? A loan? Credit card of your own?" "My credit isn't good enough," she admits. "And Brandon's parents already contributed what they could." A pause. "I didn't know Mom was using your card." I swear. I believe her. Melissa has always been self-centered, but not malicious. She's been as conditioned by our mother's behavior as I have, just in different ways. "The venue charge has been disputed," I explain. "The money will be returned to my account, but that process takes time. If you need a loan for the deposit, we can discuss terms." "Terms?" She sounds confused. "Yes, Melissa. Terms. A repayment schedule. In writing." The silence stretches for several seconds. "You're serious?" "Completely. I'm happy to help you, but not at my own expense. Not anymore." After we hang up, Ethan asks how I'm feeling. I consider the question carefully. "Steady," I say finally. For the first time in a long time, I feel steady. The following day brings an unexpected call, my father. We speak rarely, usually only on birthdays and holidays, our conversations polite but superficial. "Natalie," he says, his voice hesitant. "Your Aunt Linda called me. Told me what's happening with your mother and sister. The dress. The money." I wait, unsure where this is heading. "I owe you an apology," he continues. "When I left, I didn't consider how much would fall on your shoulders. I knew your mother favored Melissa, but I never imagined it would become this. The acknowledgement, so long overdue, brings unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'd like to help," he says. "With your wedding. With whatever you need. Maybe it's too little too late. Maybe not. Either way, it's another piece shifting in the family dynamic, another ally I didn't expect to have. By week's end, my mother makes her next move, a family email announcing a special dinner to heal our unfortunate misunderstandings before the weddings. The guest list includes aunts, uncles, and cousins on both sides. The location is my mother's condo. The underlying message is clear, a public forum where she expects social pressure to force my compliance. Little does she know, I've already spoken with key family members. The narrative is no longer solely hers to control. I RSVP with a single line, "I'll be there," with documentation. For weeks before my wedding, I'm sitting in the studio of Margot Chin, one of the city's most sought-after designers. Ethan's mother made the introduction, another unexpected alliance formed in the wake of my family's implosion. "So," Margot says, studying my original dress hanging on a rack beside us. "Tell me what you love about this dress and what you wish was different." I run my hand over the delicate lace. I love the silhouette, the way it flows. But I realized something when my mother gave it away. I chose it partly to please her. "It's beautiful, but it's not fully me." Margot nods, understanding immediately. "And who is the real Natalie? What would her dress look like?" The question catches me off guard. Who is the real Natalie? Not the responsible daughter. Not the financial safety net. Not the plain sister who steps aside so Melissa can shine. The real Natalie is stronger than she knew, I say slowly. More modern. Less concerned with traditional expectations. For the next 2 hours, Margot and I sketch, discuss, and reimagine. The dress that emerges in her preliminary design is a transformation, elements of the original preserved but elevated, traditional aspects balanced with unexpected details. It's not a completely new dress, but an evolution. Like me, I can have this ready in 3 weeks, Margot promises. It will be unmistakably yours. As I leave the studio, my phone buzzes with a text from my cousin Kate. Aunt Helen is telling everyone she's heartbroken that you're choosing money over family. Just FYI, before the dinner ambush tomorrow, I smile slightly. My mother's tactics are so predictable now that I can anticipate each move before she makes it. The family dinner is set for Saturday evening. In preparation, I make copies of key documents, the loan agreement, credit card statements showing unauthorized charges, a timeline of financial support I've provided over the years. Everything organized, everything indisputable. Ethan offers to come with me, but I decline. This is something I need to handle myself. The condo is suffocatingly familiar when I arrive. Family photos on every surface, most featuring Melissa at various life milestones. The scent of my mother's signature roast, made only for special occasions. Relatives clustered in small groups, conversations dropping to whispers as I enter. My mother swoops in immediately, embracing me with theatrical affection. "Natalie, I'm so glad you came. We need to put this unpleasantness behind us before your big day." I return the hug briefly, then step back. Let's see how the evening goes. Melissa hovers nearby, looking uncomfortable. Her eyes are red-rimmed, her usual confidence diminished. When our gazes meet, she offers a tentative smile that I acknowledge with a nod. This rift between us isn't just about the dress anymore, but it's not entirely her fault either. Dinner is a masterclass in passive aggression. My mother has seated me between 2 particularly traditional aunts, both of whom believe family obligation trumps all else. The conversation remains superficial until dessert, when my mother gently taps her glass for attention. "I want to thank everyone for coming together tonight," she begins, her voice carefully modulated to suggest emotion without actually breaking. "As you know, we've had some difficulties recently. With both girls getting married so close together, tensions have run high." Heads nod around the table. My mother continues, her narrative taking shape. "Misunderstandings about money have created a painful situation. but I know in my heart that family matters more than finances. She looks directly at me. Natalie, sweetheart, I hope tonight helps you remember what's truly important. The table falls silent, all eyes turning to me. This is the moment my mother has orchestrated, public pressure to make me back down, to return to my role as the compliant daughter who sacrifices without complaint. I set down my fork. You're right, Mom. Family is important. That's why I've financially supported you and Melissa for years, even while being treated as an afterthought. A ripple of discomfort passes through the gathering. My uncle clears his throat. My cousin Kate suppresses a smile. That's not fair, my mother protests. I've always given Melissa preferential treatment. I finish for her, including giving her my wedding dress without permission and charging her venue to my credit card without asking. My Aunt Diane gasps. Helen, you didn't. It wasn't like that, my mother insists, color rising in her cheeks. Melissa needed . What about what Natalie needed? My father's voice startles everyone. He rarely speaks at family gatherings, preferring to remain on the periphery. From what I understand, she's been everyone's safety net for years. Maybe it's time we supported her for a change. The dynamic in the room shifts palpably. My mother's carefully constructed narrative begins to unravel as relatives who've only heard her version of events start to see the fuller picture. The loan agreement was clear, I say, keeping my voice calm. The credit card was for emergencies, not Melissa's wedding expenses. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm simply asking for the respect I've earned. My mother's expression hardens. So you'll continue with this financial attack? Even if it ruins your sister's wedding? Before I can respond, Melissa surprises everyone. Stop it, Mom. Just stop. She turns to face me. Natalie, I'm sorry about the dress. About everything. I never realized. She takes a deep breath. Brandon and I are scaling back our wedding. We found a smaller venue we can afford ourselves. The admission costs her, I can tell. Melissa has never publicly acknowledged receiving preferential treatment, never mind apologizing for it. I'd still like you to be there, she adds quietly. If you want to come. The room holds its breath, waiting for my response. I study my sister, really look at her, and see something new. A glimmer of awareness. A step toward change. I'd like that, I say finally. And I'd like you both at my wedding too. But things will be different going forward. My mother opens her mouth to object, but my father cuts her off. Helen, enough. It's time to listen to Natalie for once. As the evening winds down, relatives approach me individually. Some offer support, others apologies for not seeing the situation clearly before. My Aunt Linda hugs me tightly. Your wedding is going to be beautiful, she whispers. Because it will finally be yours. Driving home, I feel lighter than I have in years. Not because I've won some family battle, but because I've finally claimed my own worth. My wedding won't be overshadowed by my sister's. My finances won't be drained by my mother's demands. My life won't be defined by their expectations. For the first time, I'm not just the practical daughter, the reliable sister, the family banked. I'm Natalie. And I'm enough. 2 weeks before my wedding, I meet my mother for coffee at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown, away from her territory and mine. Caroline advised this meeting, suggesting that resolving lingering tensions before the wedding would be healthier than carrying them into the day itself. My mother arrives precisely on time, dressed immaculately as always. She's wearing her important occasion jewelry, the pearl earrings she reserves for impressions she wants to manage carefully. Her smile is cautious as she slides into the chair across from me. You look well, she says, studying me with the critical eye I've known all my life. Though you seem tired. Wedding stress, I imagine. Already positioning herself as the concerned mother, already subtly suggesting I'm not handling things adequately. The familiar pattern is so transparent now that I almost find it amusing. I'm fine, Mom. Thank you for meeting me. A server takes our orders, chamomile tea for her, Black coffee for me. As she leaves, my mother reaches across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. Natalie, I've been thinking about everything that's happened. Perhaps I've been overly emotional about the situation. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. A minimization. The situation, I repeat. You mean giving away my wedding dress? Fraudulently using my credit card? Years of financial exploitation. She winces at the directness. That's a very harsh characterization, but an accurate one. Our drinks arrive, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. My mother adds honey to her tea, stirring with precise movements. The loan terms you've proposed are impossible for me, she says finally. You know my income. You know I can't make those payments. The terms are exactly what you agreed to when you signed the original document, I point out. I've actually extended the timeline to make it more manageable. I'll have to sell the condo, or refinance, or accept partial ownership conversion. You have options, Mom. She sets down her spoon with a sharp clink. This isn't about money. This is about punishing me for the dress. No, I say, meeting her gaze directly. The dress was just the breaking point. This is about establishing boundaries that should have existed years ago. Boundaries, she repeats, as if the word is foreign. We're family. There aren't supposed to be boundaries. This, finally, is the heart of the matter. My mother's belief that family means unlimited access, unlimited control, unlimited accommodation of her demands. That my resources, my choices, even my wedding day, belong partly to her. Healthy families have boundaries, I counter. They have respect. They don't play favorites or take advantage of each other financially. I have never played favorites. Her voice rises slightly before she catches herself, glancing around the cafe. I've always loved you both equally. It's not my fault if you're sensitive about Melissa's natural advantages. I take a slow sip of coffee, letting the familiar justification wash over me without effect. Mom, do you remember my college graduation? She blinks at the apparent change of subject. Of course. What did we do to celebrate? We had a family dinner, I believe. A dinner you left halfway through because Melissa called with a minor breakup crisis. I set down my cup. Do you remember her college graduation 2 years later? My mother shifts uncomfortably. We had that weekend in the Poconos. It was lovely. A 3-day celebration you charged to my credit card because you said the family needed it. Melissa needed it. That's not, and my promotion last year? The one that came with a significant raise? She frowns. What about it? You asked if I could finally help Melissa with her credit card debt since I was doing so well now. You never congratulated me. My mother's face flushes. You're cherry-picking examples to make me look bad. I'm establishing a pattern. A pattern you've maintained my entire life. I lean forward. A pattern that stops now, before I start my marriage. For a long moment, my mother is silent, her eyes fixed on her tea. When she finally speaks, her voice is different, softer, with the rehearsed quality dropped away. I don't know how to be different, Natalie. The admission surprises me. It's possibly the most honest thing she's ever said to me. You start by respecting my boundaries, I tell her. Financially and emotionally. You start by acknowledging that while Melissa may need more, that doesn't entitle her to take from me. You start by seeing me, really seeing me, as a person of value, not just as a resource. And if I can't do that, she asks, a tremor in her voice, then our relationship will be very limited going forward, including your role in my wedding and in my future. The reality of my position finally seems to sink in. For perhaps the first time, my mother faces the truth that she can no longer manipulate me back into the old patterns. That love without respect is not enough. That I am prepared to create distance if necessary. Your dress, she says after a long pause. The new one. Is it nice? It's such an inadequate question, so small compared to everything we're discussing. Yet it also feels like a tiny opening, an attempt, however awkward, to acknowledge the wedding she's largely ignored in favor of Melissa's. It's beautiful, I say. It's exactly right for me. She nods slowly. I'd like to see it. If you want to show me. Not a full reconciliation. Not a complete transformation. But a small step. I'll take it with caution. We'll see. I check my watch. I have a fitting this afternoon, actually. My mother gathers her purse, our coffee meeting clearly reaching its conclusion. Natalie, about the loan. I'll talk to my bank about refinancing options. Another small step. I nod, acknowledging the effort. As we stand to leave, she hesitates, then asks, will you and Ethan still come to dinner next week? Before the wedding? Melissa and Brandon will be there. We could try to start fresh. I consider the invitation, weighing the potential for genuine change against the risk of falling back into old patterns. I'll come, I say finally. But at the first sign that this is another manipulation, Ethan and I will leave. And Mom? I meet her gaze directly. I'll expect a sincere apology for the dress. From both you and Melissa. Her lips press together briefly before she nods. Understood. We part without hugging, without the performative affection she typically insists upon. It feels more honest this way. As I walk to my car, I receive a text from Melissa. Mom just called me. Said you two had coffee. Are you still coming to dinner next week? I type back a simple response. Yes. With clear expectations, my phone buzzes again almost immediately. I have your old dress in my closet. I haven't altered it. Never felt right. Can I bring it to dinner? I stare at the message, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. Too little, too late? Perhaps. But also a recognition of wrongdoing. A step toward accountability. Yes. Bring it. I slip my phone into my pocket and continue toward the bridal salon for my fitting. My mother and sister may never fully become the family I deserved. But they might, with consistent boundaries, become a family I can safely include in my life, and that's enough progress for today. Morning light filters through the hotel suite windows as I sit alone, watching dawn break over the city. In a few hours, I'll walk down the aisle to marry Ethan. But right now, in this quiet moment, I take time to acknowledge the journey that brought me here. On the bed behind me lies Margot's creation, my wedding dress in its final form. Not the original dress my mother gave to Melissa, but something far more meaningful. A gown that represents not just my relationship with Ethan, but my relationship with myself. Strong, authentic, unapologetic, a soft knock on the door breaks my reverie. It's open, I call. Aunt Linda enters, carrying coffee and pastries. Thought you might need breakfast before the chaos begins. I smile, accepting the coffee gratefully. You're a lifesaver. She settles beside me on the window seat, her gaze warm. How are you feeling? And I want the real answer, not the bride's standard. I'm so excited. I consider the question carefully. Peaceful, which is not what I expected to feel after everything. Linda nods, understanding. You've done the hard work, Natalie. You've set boundaries. You've reclaimed your worth. This day belongs to you now. She's right. The past 6 weeks have transformed more than just my wedding plans. The family dinner a week ago had been tense but productive. My mother and Melissa had both offered apologies, imperfect ones, but sincere enough to accept provisionally. Melissa had returned the original dress, unworn and unaltered. And most importantly, I had maintained my boundaries throughout, neither yielding to manipulation nor engaging in unnecessary conflict. Is Mom behaving herself this morning? I ask. Linda chuckles. Helen is. Trying. She wanted to come up with me, but I suggested she help with the flowers downstairs instead. Gave her a task to focus on. A wise move. My mother thrives on feeling needed, on having a defined role. It keeps her from creating drama to secure attention. The door opens again, and my bridesmaids arrive in a flurry of excitement. Kate, my childhood friend Rachel, and to everyone's surprise, Melissa. Including her had been a calculated risk, but an important test of our evolving relationship. So far, she's been uncharacteristically mindful of her place, careful not to overshadow or insert herself at the center. The hair and makeup team is setting up in the adjoining room, Kate announces. And Ethan's mom sent this up. She hands me a small gift box with a card. Inside is a delicate bracelet with a single pearl. The card reads simply, "To my new daughter, welcome to our family. One where you will always be valued for exactly who you are." Tears prick my eyes. Throughout this ordeal, Ethan's parents have been steadfastly supportive, offering the unconditional acceptance I never fully received from my own family. The next few hours pass in a blur of preparation. Hair styled, makeup applied, champagne sipped, photos taken. Through it all, I remain present, savoring each moment rather than worrying about my mother's potential reactions or Melissa's possible jealousy. When it's time to put on the dress, I ask everyone except Aunt Linda to step out. As she helps me into the gown, I catch my reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognize myself. Not because I look different physically, but because the woman staring back at me stands differently, shoulders back, chin lifted, eyes clear. "You look magnificent," Linda says softly. "Truly yourself." A knock at the door announces my father's arrival. He stops short when he sees me, emotion crossing his face. "Natalie," he says, his voice thick. "You're perfect." He's made efforts these past weeks, offering financial support for the wedding, which I declined, attending family events, speaking up when my mother falls into old patterns. Our relationship remains a work in progress, but his presence today feels right. Before we head downstairs, he takes my hand awkwardly. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you all those years. I should have seen what was happening, should have protected you from feeling secondary." I squeeze his hand. "Thank you for saying that." It doesn't erase the past, but acknowledgement matters. Recognition matters. The ceremony space is exactly as Ethan and I envisioned when we reimagined our wedding, intimate, filled with meaningful details rather than showy extravagance. White roses and blue hydrangeas line the aisle. Candles flicker in hurricane lamps. Our closest friends and carefully selected family members fill the seats. My mother sits in the front row, wearing the lavender dress she originally deemed too understated for a mother of the bride. Beside her is my sister in the pale blue bridesmaid's dress that matches the others, not the spotlight-grabbing dress she'd initially selected. Small changes that signal larger shifts. As the music begins and my father and I start down the aisle, I see only Ethan waiting for me, his face illuminated with love. This moment, pure, untainted by family drama, is exactly what we fought to preserve. Our vows are personal, written from the heart. When Ethan promises to always see you clearly, value you completely, and choose you daily, I know he understands exactly what those words mean to me. At the reception, I navigate family dynamics with newfound grace. When my mother begins to dominate a conversation with distant relatives, I gently redirect rather than acquiesce. When Melissa's toast veers toward being about herself, she catches my eye and course-corrects mid-sentence. Progress, however imperfect. Later, during the father-daughter dance, my dad says quietly, "You've become an extraordinary woman, Natalie." Despite us, not because of us. Maybe because of what I learned to overcome, I reply. The evening winds down, and Ethan and I prepare to leave for our honeymoon. As we make our way toward the exit, my mother approaches, her expression unguarded for once. "Your wedding was beautiful," she says. "Exactly right for you." For simple words, exactly right for you, that acknowledge my choices, my preferences, my identity separate from her expectations. It's not a complete transformation, but in this moment, it's enough. "Thank you, Mom," I say sincerely as I end the car. Ethan takes my hand. "Happy?" I smile, feeling the weight of the new ring on my finger, the lightness in my heart. "Yes." Not because everything is perfect with my family. It isn't, and it might never be. But because I'm no longer defined by their perception of me. 6 months ago, my mother gave my wedding dress to my sister, declaring her the prettier bride. She couldn't have known that in doing so, she'd set in motion the events that would finally free me from a lifetime of being overlooked. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as painful losses. My original dress is hanging in my closet now, returned but never to be worn. I don't need it anymore. It belongs to a version of myself that no longer exists, the daughter desperate for approval, willing to diminish herself to keep peace. The woman I am today, wife, daughter on new terms, sister with boundaries, wears her own choices proudly. Not second best, not the plain alternative, not the reliable afterthought, simply herself. And finally, that's enough.